So I would like to start with a quote, and I guess this is the next slide. Yes. This quote comes, I don't know where, some people say it comes from Gandhi, but I checked. It existed a long time before. A falling tree makes more noise than a growing forest. I love this quote. Because if we think about how we get news about the world, what kind of news do we get? We get news always about falling trees because mass medias are made to detect the incident, something that breaks on the line of continuity. What I'm interested in as a researcher is not the falling tree, but the growing forest. And this is what I would like to talk about tonight, the growing forest. The fact is that there are huge things that happen in this world. Absolutely enormous, huge things that we will never hear one word about in the news. And they're big. But why don't we hear anything about them? Because it's about the forest that grows, not about the tree that falls. And so, what I propose here is to invite us into a journey where we are going to explore facts, things that happen in this world, and it may look completely crazy, but they are here. And if we analyze, if we project where this is going to take us, then we can start to have a much better picture of where our species is evolving. Not just our civilization, our species. So let's go into this journey. And first, what I would like to cover here is 4 big domains: sociology, collective intelligence, markets, and economy. Why is this 4? Well, because we have something very interesting to observe. It's kind of looking at the same thing, but from different angles. And sociology and collective intelligence as a discipline, and looking also at markets, how people buy and sell things, or looking at the economy, are very important points of view. And that will give us kind of a circular overview of what we want to anticipate in the future. So let's begin with sociology. And I want to ask you a question. Who knows the words cultural creatives? Cultural creatives. Raise your hand, just for me to check. Okay. Let's say we have a minority here. A very tiny minority. Cultural creatives. About 12 years ago, in the US, one of the greatest sociologists, his name is Paul Ray, was asked to make a big survey, to really make a kind of a scan of the whole American population. And tens of thousands of people were interviewed about their taste, their relationships, their political views, what they buy, what they believe, their religion, and so on, in order to have a very, very precise picture of the American population. And guess what? This researcher found a new population, a population that we did not think about, that he called the cultural creatives. Who are they? Well, these people are people who believe that they need, for instance, to balance their professional life, the doing, with their being, what happens inside. So they're not that interested in, making lots of money or, getting big power here and there. Also, these people are not much interested in conventional politics, right wing, left wing, or consumerism. They don't care about consumerism, but they are very interested in green values. Not Green Party, it's a different thing, but green values. They have also a global awareness of the world. They know that if they do something here, something is going to be affected somewhere else in the world. These are the cultural creatives. And this is a whole new culture. And what Paul Ray, the sociologist, found out is that at the time, 12 years ago, about 50 million Americans were cultural creatives. And one thing they all share in common is they think they are alone. So he wrote a book, and it was a bestseller, worldwide bestseller, translated in many languages, and cultural creatives became aware of themselves. And now there have been surveys done in every country in the world, many countries in the world, and we see that it is a growing population everywhere. Today in the US, it has evolved. It's about 35% of the population. That's huge. And in Europe, it's about between 17 and 35%, depending which country. France would be kind of, 20%, kind of the lower scale, whereas if you go into northern countries of Europe, then you get into the 35%. What it means here is that behaviors are changing. Cultural creatives is a growing population that has different values, that makes business in a different way, that has a way to build the society in a very, very different way compared to the conventional moderns. This is what they are called. You know, the way we look at the world in the conventional way, like what we would hear on the news, for instance. Now, here's the scoop. I've been talking to many, many big decision makers this past years. Each time I have asked them, have you heard about cultural creatives? Do you know anything about these big, surveys and sociological studies that tell you about what the market is going to be in the next years? In my experience, none of them has told me that they knew about it. Interesting. So that's the first angle. Let's move on and let's go into collective intelligence. That's my big field. I love collective intelligence. What is collective intelligence? It's two things. First thing, it is a property of social living. When we go into a forest, we see collective intelligence all around because species collaborate. Because animals collaborate, plants collaborate, they can be in the same species or between species, but we see that there is huge collective intelligence out there. It's not just here in this room between human beings. It's there in nature. So collective intelligence is a property of social life, and it has turned into a science, the science that studies collective intelligence. And this is what I love to do. Let me give you a very quick overview on the different kinds of collective intelligence that exist in this world, because then it will help us understand what's happening in our species. Let's begin with this first one. What do you think this is? How would you call this kind of collective intelligence that we see? Insects. What else? I hear different. Well, okay, let's give it a name. Swarm collective intelligence. It's probably the oldest form of collective intelligence we know on Earth, when you have lots and lots and lots of individuals not very differentiated from one another. It can be ants, it can be a flock of birds, a school of fish, it can be a termite colony, bees, wasps, and so on. So these social animals usually operate in circumstances where the individual doesn't have a big variety of things to do. They kind of do all of the same thing, not a big range of things to do, but collectively they can achieve an incredible amount of things. So if you look at an ant knows how to do a big amount of tasks, but you will never see one ant go on the side and start dancing, for instance, or have a different behavior. Okay? Now, this kind of collective intelligence, do we know it as human beings? Yes, no? Okay, yes, raise your hand. No, raise your hand. Okay, well, not many yes, not many no's. Okay. Well, we know it. We know it, for instance, when we go at work, when we go to work in the morning, when we're stuck into traffic. We are in our car, and the kind of moves we can do is very, very limited. We have to go, to move forward. We can go left and right, but we can't fly. We can just go out of the car and do whatever we want. But when we look at the collective, we have one big city that gets filled with millions of people in the morning and then emptied with millions of people in the evening. Who could have planned that? It just happens. It's an emergent property. And this is the very important thing about swarm intelligence. Now, swarm collective intelligence is not the main kind of collective intelligence that we know as human species. The one that we know is this one. This is what we come from. It is called original collective intelligence. Original collective intelligence because this is where we come from. A small group of people, highly individualized, and as a small group, we always know what's happening around us. By a small group, I mean, 12, 15, 20, 30 sometimes 50, but not more. Here in this room, we're not anymore in original collective intelligence. For instance, we couldn't play a ball game. That would be too complex. Our brains would not be ready to process the complexity of information. We would have to find another structure. In the original collective intelligence, there is one property that I want to name. Only one. There are many of them, plenty of them, but one that is very important. It's called holopticism. That's a hard one to say. I had to train myself. Holopticism. It comes from the Greek holos, holistic, the whole, and optical, see the whole. If you play a ball game, for instance, what happens? You can see everyone around you playing. That's transparency. But also, as a trained player, you know what is the emerging whole, what's happening as a team, as a whole, as a unit. And that very specific property is very unique because think about it. As a player, you're fully sovereign. No one is giving you orders where to go. Do you have to ask permission to go and run here or here? No. You're in your creative self. And at the same time, you are serving the collective. Isn't that interesting? Because if we move to bigger organizations, it doesn't work this way anymore. And all the politics that we know since the industrial age is either, ideologies about, the individual is the most important thing and this is what has to prevail, or on the other hand, the collective is the most important thing, and the individual has to, obey to the collective. But it's not both. It's one or the other. Here, it's both. So let's remember this property because it might tell us something interesting for what is going to evolve in the future. Now, humanity took a very interesting path, something we haven't seen in conventional nature, in the animal life. It is this kind of collective intelligence. If we need to be many people, more than 15, more than 20, thousands or millions, then we need that, the pyramid. It works with the chain of command, or here you have, the pharaoh at the top and the priests and nobles underneath, and then the traders and shopkeepers and scribes, and then underneath you have the farmers and herders, and then at the bottom you have the slaves or unskilled workers. This is the original kind of chain of command, the first one that we saw in the first civilizations since the invention of writing and accounting and currencies. This kind of big social structures were only possible because of the writing. And this was, if we think about it, now we complain a lot about, these big, huge structures, but let's think about it. It was a huge breakthrough because humanity could make a huge leap and people could start to do things together, for the worse or the better. It's not about what is good or wrong here. It's about the path that humanity has found in building pyramidal collective intelligence. Here it is, pyramidal collective intelligence. And today, it's not this kind of pyramid anymore, of course. But if we look at a big company, a big corporation, or an administration, or a government, it still works upon the same basic rules. You have someone at the top. It might be an elected person, no problem, or someone who really, by his work or her work, went to the top, and you still have a chain of command. And if you are somewhere, you don't have holopticism anymore. You see some parts of the whole, but all the players have a very partial view. And this is why it is so hard to deal with complexity out there. Now, what's happening today, and what we observe, this is the angle from collective intelligence that I'm sharing here. What is happening is that this social species, pyramidal collective intelligence, is now hitting a wall. Just like evolution, there's a moment when a species has to evolve. It can't stay this way for some reason. The reason here is that pyramidal collective intelligence is not appropriate, is not fit to deal with complexity. It's a great thing for achieving big work. It's not appropriate with big complexity. Let me take an example to understand that. Let's say I have my dog here. Nice dog. Hello. Say hi. Thank you. Sit. Okay. He's a nice dog. He sits here. Okay? Give me your leg. Thank you. Friendly, huh? Okay. Now, you're going to be nice with me because I have to go on vacation. And would you take care of the house, take care of the plants here, get phone calls, if I'm not here, and lock the doors. And you can take here the keys of the car. That's for you, and take care of the car too. Okay, I go on vacation, come back 1 week later, disappointed. I'm very disappointed by my dog. Why is that? Are we so different, this dog and myself? We're not. We're made with the same fabric. It's just we are composed in a different way. That's the only difference. The same atoms, the same molecules, same thing, same system, but we are composed in a different way. So this dog has a different capacity and a different consciousness that this guy here. And this is the very same thing with pyramidal collective intelligence compared to what's next, which I'm going to talk about, is that we are asking pyramidal collective intelligence organizations, we're asking them to do things that they cannot do by design. By design. They can't do that. They can't cope with global warming. They can't deal with values, for instance, value-driven behaviors. It's very hard. It has to come from an external constraint. It doesn't come from within. I could go on and on and on, but the point is that this limitation is somehow the bad news because we suffer from that. And at the same time, it's creating evolution. Evolution is this. Yes. What is it? Network. What else? Energy. Complexity. Galaxy. What else? Universe. Interaction. Mushrooms. Okay, I won't ask you, Gauthier, what you're using in your life. All right. Well, every one of you is totally right. This is a picture, a modelized picture of the internet. And yes, it works like a galaxy. And yes, it works exactly like our brain. The structure, the way those connections are made are exactly the same way it works with our brains and with mushrooms. And Gauthier Chapelle will probably talk a little bit about it, how nature works here. It's a natural emerging system. This kind of collective intelligence is very new because, 15 years ago or 20 years ago, who heard about this thing? And now it's in our everyday life. And we have seen nothing of it. It's just starting. We're just still playing with, these laptops, with keyboards, with small screens. It's just the beginning of it. This kind of collective intelligence, we call it holomidal collective intelligence. There was pyramid, and holomidal means it sees the whole. What happens is that in this kind of collective intelligence is that we start to see huge circles and small circles and medium circles, communities of people, local or global, who start to self-actualize themselves. They are capable of just dealing with themselves without the need of a chain of command and control. They don't need anyone at the top. Now, it doesn't mean everyone is equal and everything is flat. That's not true. This is a belief system. It's completely wrong. There are huge differences between people, different competencies, different levels, different skills, different stories, and so on. But in these networks, we start to see, again, many of the properties of original collective intelligence. Remember, in original collective intelligence, I can be myself. I can be in my full creative power. I better be in my full creative power. And because of that, I serve the collective. Whereas in pyramidal collective intelligence, I will be asked from school to give up some of my sovereignty so I can learn to obey in the chain of command. That's the price to pay. Again, I'm not being judgmental here. I'm just talking about facts here. In this new holomidal collective intelligence, we see a big change in all the social contract. What we see in the Arab Spring, for instance, is an example of that. Civil society starts to self-organize itself. All the ideas are flowing from one place to another. No one can really stop it. It's not because you turn the internet off that you will stop the flow of ideas, because it's much more complex than that. Now, where it is still in a very early stage, it is that the internet does not yet allow us to coordinate with very complex actions. It's still good for very complex ideas to flow. It's okay to say, let's go tomorrow in the streets and do something. But it's still not very appropriate to build very complex things, such as a computer or an airplane. Those kinds of things are still in the old age of pyramidal collective intelligence. But believe me, it is changing very, very fast, because we start to see open source cars, open source technologies everywhere. It's not just software anymore. It's open source as an economic model where we move from competition economies into social economies, mutualist economies. And that's a big, big leap. So that's what we can observe. At the Collective Intelligence Research Institute, we observe those things. I am aware that I'm making lots of shortcuts here. Like it looks like I'm, just saying stuff. But of course, what we're talking about here, we check it, we observe, we try to come with grounded facts, but that would be too long for tonight. Now let's go into our third point of view. Remember, first one was sociology, second one has been collective intelligence, and the third one, market. Market, not the Dow Jones and NASDAQ and all these things, not this kind of market. I'm talking about the way we buy things in our everyday life. This is evolving very quick. Let's begin with this. Today, in the US, and very soon in France, with any smartphone, iPhone or any other smartphone, I can be in a store, I see a product, I turn on my smartphone, and I can scan the barcode, thank you. And instantly I will have this on my screen. It tells me three things. First, I get an overall rating about the product, between 0 and 10. And then it gives me some feedback about, is it healthy or not? Is it good for the environment or not? 0 to 10. Is it good from the social point of view? 0 to 10. And if I go on the internet site later, I can even see that these three grades can break down into very complex array of subgrades. It is the result of a very deep study, that what you see here. But I can get it in a fraction of a second in any supermarket, on the fly, in the US, and very soon in Europe. Good guide. That's one example among many others. What does it tell us? It tells us that right now, I can decide because I have information. In the recent past, I could just, see, okay, big, beautiful, fancy package and tells me that I'm going to be the happiest person in the world if I get this, and I will be a man or I'll be free, whatever. But today I just have to scan it and I'll have another information. And this is changing the whole behaviors. And again, when I ask decision makers, are you aware of these things? Are you aware that cultural creatives are coming? And it's a growing population, and in the next few years, people won't buy the same way. You won't be able to sell them, those stupid, debilitating marketing campaigns. You will have to tell them the truth. And the truth will be your best ally. Your best ally is truth. This is what it is showing us here. Not to name those hundreds of social technologies, social media, social networks, social, you name it, where we can share ideas, videos, content, feelings, tags, short text, big text, and so on. And what's interesting here is that it is weaving every single second new kinds of relationship. You see, in the past, the only way I could meet someone is either I bump into this person in the street because we're in a physical proximity, or it's part of my social network in pyramidal collective intelligence, because social networks were created by pyramidal collective intelligence. But today what is new is that in a few keywords or just a short tweet, I can ask a question, and instantly, or in a few minutes, or a couple of hours, someone else in the world will reply. That means the social fabric is built on meaning. Social fabric gets built on meaning. Think about it. Because this has never happened in our species. And this is why our species is evolving. It's just right in front of our eyes. But it comes as weak signals. So we use it every day and we don't really realize what's the real change here. But if you think about it, our species is evolving. Another thing about the holomidal collective intelligence, have you heard about this word crowdsourcing? Raise your hand. It's okay not to raise your hand. Crowdsourcing. I don't like this word because the word crowd, les foules en français, crowds, it does not really reflect reality because those so-called crowds are made of individuals and individualized people who provide knowledge, know-how, skills, resources to build something together. So I prefer to say people. And people, they think about a product on the networks, they design it, they build it, they test it, and they support it. That means the whole chain of value creation now becomes possible in these social networks because we have the socialware and communityware that provides us the capacity to deal with complexity. This is just happening. So, my point is, if you are an entrepreneur today, or if you are the boss of an existing company, you better think about these things. Because your company tomorrow is not about, here are the resources on one side, the black box, resources are coming, and another black box, the market, and we're the center of the universe, and we make a product, and we decide everything. This is what a 5-year-old child thinks. He thinks he's the center of the world. When evolution comes, then you realize that you're part of a much wider array, a much wider network of wholeness. And here, as an entrepreneur, you should think, I am going to be a gardener, someone who gardens communities, someone who serves communities, a servant leader. That means I will, as an entrepreneur, I will facilitate every single step here. I will serve that. And this will be my business. The business model is here. You see, it's a very different mindset. Let's go to the fourth. Economy. That's a big one, this one. We talk a lot about those falling trees, huh? In economy, right? Everything is falling apart. Okay, well, same thing. First, let's look at this picture. This picture, I got it from Gautier. Who got it from somewhere else and so on. What could it be? What is this green, blue thing on the planet? Right. This is all the water we have on our planet. Oceans, rivers, drinkable water, anything, any molecule of water on this planet is here. And it tells us something very interesting for the economy. It is the words natural capitalism. Natural capitalism. It means that many people, more and more people, are trying to build new ways to create the economy based not on gambling or the big casino out there, but based on real assets that we have. Some of them might be scarce, like water, for instance, and others are not scarce. But in both cases, we want to ask ourselves, how can we build economies that are based on real resources that the earth is providing and that we can give back? Because economy is a circular thing. In many places in the world, in most places in the world actually, money is lacking. Money is lacking. It says that those populations, those territories are under monetized. under-monetized. Under-monetization means something very important. It says that people still have the wealth. The wealth, by wealth I mean what? I mean they know how to work, they have skills, they have resources, they are ready to exchange with one another, but they're just staying like statues, not because of a lack of resources, but because of a lack of money. It means the accounting tokens, called euros or dollars, have gone somewhere else. And their response to that is okay, let's create our own currency. Why do we need to be dependent on those top-down imposed currencies? We can create our own currencies. And they start to create local currencies. The city of Grasse could create a local currency where most exchange here could be done in this local currency, and that would liberate the flows. If we look at these local currencies, it starts to happen everywhere in the world. You don't hear about it in the news, but it happens everywhere in the world. Have you heard about transition towns, for instance? Transition towns, raise your hand if you know about it. Okay. Again, big news, not in the news. Transition towns are those many, many towns around the world who are looking for a way to be self-sufficient with energy, with food, and to try to make a very nice, beautiful lifestyle with themselves without being dependent. You know, if there's a big crisis, conventional cities just collapse in the next few days. That's it. Transition towns are trying to find an answer to that. And one of the answers is let's create our local currency because we can start to collaborate and to exchange our wealth together. Why do we need euros or dollars? And if we want to make business with the outside world, we can still do that with the big currencies. So you have the Totnes pounds, you have in Germany the Chiemgauer, you have the Skog in Italy, you have the Ithaca hours in the city of Ithaca in the US, and many of them. I could go for the next hours just to name those thousands of local complementary currencies. And that's not all. In the US, for instance, there's an institution called time banking. People don't have money, but they have time. So you can create a time currency. And I give, 3 hours of my time for my neighbor for gardening, and this neighbor is going to use these 3 hours to learn English with another person, and this other person is going to use 2 hours to buy some food at the local store, and the local store will use all the collected hours to, pay for other services and so on. It is a currency. It's not barter. It is a currency. Time banking does that. It's just a mind shift. We can do that right now. A few weeks ago, a couple of months ago, I was speaking with a CEO and all the staff of a big company, computer company, and they just had one of these terrible meetings where the VPs, the vice presidents, just had to fight against one another to get budget allocation for their own department. Money is scarce. So inside an organization where everyone is supposed to collaborate, here we are. People are fighting against one another, and the level of collective intelligence goes down. What if this company creates a mutual credit of ours so that inside the company, they can start to trade and support each other, not with a scarce currency from the outside, but with a sufficient currency inside? Very easy. It's just a paradigm shift. Let's look at other examples very quickly. Banco Palmas. These are called social currencies. Social currencies, these ones come from Brazil. Same thing, with people, no money, and they try to create their own currency, and such a success that it becomes a worldwide kind of currency. We also know some corporate currencies. This one, Air Miles. We all know this one. This is a global one where people start to buy and sell miles, where you can use that for buying a hotel or an airline ticket or a rented car. Same thing. This is a currency, and you see that it can be used for social purpose or also sometimes for corporate purpose. Another example of currency that is very important is the WIR Bank. Who's heard about the WIR Bank? Raise your hand. Okay, just a few. Well, do you know that this currency is from Switzerland, and it is more than 80 years old? It's older than the euro. It's older than, Second World War, and it's still a very powerful currency here. And most of the Switzerland economy, the stability there is due to this kind of currency, a corporate currency. You're not going to go and buy your bread with that. So my point here, with a very quick overview, it's a huge topic. It is that, number one, the monopoly of banks issuing money is gone. The point is that more and more people around the world are creating their own currencies for special purpose, local economy, social economy, corporate economy, and we see that it's going to be more and more complex, and there are going to be many, many, many currencies in the future. And it opens to, oh, sorry, I forgot also this one. On the internet, have you heard about Bitcoins? Okay, Bitcoins, huge global currency on the internet. Linden dollars from Second World. Who's heard about it? Not many people. It's a huge phenomenon. Facebook, who's creating its credits currency. Raise your hand if you know about it. Not many again. And we see also on the internet those things like Facebook, I like something, or like Google with the +1. If I like a site, I can click on this button and it will add my vote to this site, to this internet site, or this person, or this blog, or the stars in eBay where I can rate a seller, or all these badges in 4 squares where I can allocate, I can say that this person is an expert in such or such field. And these are called social capital currencies. I'm not going to buy and sell things, but I am going to build a reputation. Remember, original collective intelligence in a small village? What do I have? I have a reputation. People know if I'm the baker. People know if I make good bread or not good bread. People know if I am trustworthy or not. So the point is that what we see on the internet and in the world is the coming of free currencies. It is when people say, why are we ourselves making dependent on conventional money, which has a built-in set of rules that is imposed from a minority to the majority, whereas it's so easy now to create the currencies that we need for our town, for our territory, for our corporations, and we can make them interoperable. They can play together. This is just happening. This is the fourth angle. So, here's for the overview. What I wanted to share with you is that these are growing forests. And you see when I asked, raise your hand if you heard about it, not many of us are raising their hands because it's not in the news. But believe me, when you spend time like me observing those things, we get a fascinating picture of this humanity, our species that is evolving. And our invitation in this Congress is to think, to question ourselves, what is next? What should I do? What should I do as a worker, as an employee, as a CEO, as a citizen? What should I do? And we're going to talk about it in this Congress no later than tomorrow. The last thing I would want to say is support your pioneers. Now, I'm not going to come with a hat here, but if there is something you want to ask yourself to do, is support your pioneers. Because this is those guys who are going to take you where you want to go. Thank you very much. Thank you.